from the county that is shown.
Mayor, like Paul's meeting order.
It's in my package.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That sounded good. Down the roll call, please.
Martyr.
Here.
Mazer. Schneider. Sofa. Weaver. Wilson. Zimmer.
All right. Non-agenda items from the sidelines. Public comment. We'll start off with Jason Parker. You get, by the way, you've got 5 minutes to speak. Okay, folks.
You allowed to hand over minutes? No, I just want to, my concern with the condos going in, from my understanding it was with the 40 units and now it wants to get bumped up to 64. There's potentially that much more traffic going down the Bell River, which is already a mess. We don't have plans of getting that side fixed for a long time. We got a lot of children now on Bell River, and we got speeders going down Bell River nonstop all the time. We need to get this out in the open. We need the public to be able to be in this more, and that's all I got to say about it.
All right. Thanks, Jason.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jason.
Next up, Tina Manzik.
Did you say Tina Manzer?
Yes.
I'm going to give my minutes to Jim Field.
You gonna allow that?
No.
You get 5 minutes.
You want to speak, you
You
can
get up and
speak.
speak if you want.
You want my 5 minutes? I got it. So first, we're going to start with the American veterans in our town. Do I need to sign in? Or you got it? Hand here, sir, please. Thank you. We're going to start with the American veterans in our town. We're going to start with the American Disabilities Act. The American Disabilities Act is at a county level, a state level, and a federal level. And violations there are $75,000 for the first one. Bell River's entire road from Will and Tori's house, they're not here, but that's next door to Kim and Jerry's house. That sidewalk is so dangerous. I'm not going to waste my 5 minutes on explaining it. I sent it to Jason. He said he'd talk about it, but if I can't share my time, I'll talk about it. We have wounded American vets, don't have the Veterans Administration coverage. We have community mental health people living next door to me, as well as the apartment behind me. They have rights. It's called recipient rights. It's worse than going to visit a judge. These people have a right to walk on our community sidewalks. They are broke down. They are unsafe. Poor Spike just died. If he was still alive and wanted to walk down Bell River with his cane or his cart, he would fall and break a hip. And whose fault is that? Jason told me they changed the ordinance that made it the property owners. So I'm just going to bring up, and you can raise your hand if you agree with me, but the property owner, the developer, and the builder, they're not here tonight. Where are they? If they don't have the common sense and respect to come here and speak to all of us and explain why they're being so disrespectful, we don't owe them anything. They owe us. We're the taxpayers in this town. We are the ones. I would have had family come move in. No, that's all I'll say. But the American Disabilities Act, so what happens if I'm in a wheelchair and I want to go to the Dollar General because my husband's gone? I've broken my ankle. It's summertime. I should be able to go out, get in a wheelchair, go down my driveway, go across the street, get on the sidewalk, and be able to propel myself safely. Are we going against the American Disabilities Act here in Michigan, or Memphis, Michigan? Because it's not going to stop here. This is your warning. The American vets for the VA in Mount Clemens, we have American vets that live in that apartment street over there behind the group home. Their only access to food, unless they're going to a restaurant, is the Dollar General. That's the path they take. So I'll stop there. recipient rights, the VA, and community mental health, you're not giving them the rights. They have a right to move as freely as you and you and you and you. And I'm not going to stand for it. It's not blockaded. So, and there's also no alternative route to go around. The other day, I watched two little girls. One fell and hurt herself. But the other one then went out in the street, was riding her bike, which when she pulled out, she's pulling out behind a construction truck, and it could have been Mr. Weaver coming up the road from his house. Sorry to pick on you, I just know you live at the end
It's all
of the
right,
road.
I'm used to it.
They come up the road, and what if Steve would have hit that little girl? Kids matter. They are our future. They are our future. Mental health matters. Veterans matter. Disabled people matter. All of you are one car accident away from being just like those people that live over there. Everyone in this room could have a disabled child that could be living in the group home next to me. And I'm not complaining. I think it's a great place. I don't appreciate 68 condos going back in there. I think it was you that said it started off as 40. Now it's 68. Not 64, 68. He doesn't even show up. You guys, wake up. He doesn't care. He just thinks it's a done deal. It's not. It's not. And that's what everyone in this room needs to stand by and live by. We have neighbors' yards that are flooded. The back property behind these brand new young neighbors that have moved into our area, they can't even sit in their backyard because of the mosquito infestation, because of the water that's back there. And those pictures have yet to come.
Would you like to finish up your time?
I will. But I expect you as the mayor to care about us. I expect all of you. I care about all of you. There's a young lady, and she's on the planning commission. She told me she doesn't walk down my street to say hi to me anymore because
Thank
she
you very
can't
much
walk.
for your comments. Your time's up.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Tina.
You're welcome.
Bill LaGrassa?
I think the ordinance is 6 inches or 12 inches for grass, and you get cited, or the city cuts it,
He's 6 now.
6 inches. The field next to my house, where the condos are supposed to go, grass is out of control. Like she said, we can't even go out in the backyard, the mosquitoes are so bad. And nothing's being done about it. Then again, he walks away freestanding. So, that's all I got.
All right, thank you. Jim Fields?
Jim Fields, 80263 Bell River Road. I sent a correspondence to the city based on the last council meetings, summary of the erosion drainage problems. I submitted a formal letter. I also submitted a written correspondence for this meeting tonight. I believe it's sitting on the table. A couple quick graphics, city plan, city density plan. These are numbers applied to the houses on plats in the residential 1 area. These are geometric shapes encompassing each one of those numbers of houses within those plats. These same geometric are scaled to show the red section as what's being proposed as 68 units compared to every other geometric shape in the city of Memphis. Okay, that should put it in perspective. To go down the list, I'll start off. I submitted a formal correspondence to the meeting. I'm a property owner and I'm assessed taxpayer, parcel number 0403021125-004. Located at 80263 Bell River Road in Memphis, Michigan. I personally have received no written notices from the city of Memphis regarding any public hearing regarding the property adjoining my property, adjacent to my property, within 300 feet of my property. In my summary, I have listed all of the violations of that and the Open Meeting Act of 1976 in the state of Michigan. I have 7 pages of violations just on the public hearing portions so far to date. In my correspondence, I have detailed every violation of the Code of Ordinances within Memphis occurring currently. I have detailed every Code of Ordinance violation with the master deed submitted as approved, presented to the City Council through the Planning Commission. In 2020, when this developer came before you and presented a master deed and did it under the Condominium Act established in the state of Michigan, there are strict guidelines for how that has to proceed. They have not been followed. I have detailed every section of the codes in the correspondence in writing. I'm not going to waste time going over them. I'm just going to detail them so everybody understands. There are violations to the Michigan Condominium Act. There are violations, multiple violations to the Memphis Code. There are violations through the code concurrent through phase 1 development, upkeep, maintenance, erosion, drainage. It's all there. The retention/detention pond is part of phase 1. It is not there. It is a mandatory requirement per your code, part of their master deed. It's not complete. Okay? When I buy a condominium, and I researched this with my attorneys, 2 attorneys and a realtor, I did my homework. I chose Memphis because of Memphis. I chose Memphis because of the codes, the laws, the community, the size of the community, and the neighbors. I did my research. I did my due diligence on the information I was provided by law required to be given to me by the developer. My master deed, my disclosure statement. So far, the disclosure statement and master deed do not align with where we're at. My attorneys are looking at how we're going to approach that next. The violation of the Condominium Act. But they're violating your codes, and it's allowed to happen. I don't know if this is a pattern. I don't understand if this is being propagated somehow by forces outside of open meetings. I don't know. It does not look good. And like I said, I'm embarrassed. I look at it and I'm embarrassed. I think the city of Memphis deserves better. I think the community deserves better. I think you need to take a hard look at the people that came here tonight with everything that's been provided to you, and look who's not here.
Amen.
Look who's not here tonight. They're not taking this seriously. They presented a master deed to you, you approved it and passed it through. They're not developing it. They're not holding up their contract. They're required to hold up their contract. If they don't hold up the contract and they're in violation of the Michigan Condominium Act, then the state can come in. And if the state comes in, first thing will happen, the county will come in. County comes in, they're going to look at you, and then the state's going to come in and they're going to look at everything else. I don't think that you want that. I don't want that. Nobody wants that by code. But it's there. I would seriously review the information I provided to you all to look at, and look at the codes, and look at why there's no execution and enforcement of these codes in your own ordinances. At any point in time, if you're talking about using a nuclear type option because you can't go the route of variances to change codes and enforcement, which is the right way to do things, and there's no hardships for it, then there's a problem with the initial presentation. And that's where you're at. If you can't logically apply variances to it, you should just push back and go come back with something there. If you ask the developer today, I would probably tell you, and I would put my money on it, they do not have a compliant drawing set to give you, because it was never consideration. We good? That's it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim.
All right, moving on. The council's questions, ordinance, and procedures with our attorney. At this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to our attorney, Mr. Alan Francis.
Thank you, Mayor. So I want to start by thanking everybody and for coming and scheduling this meeting, but also letting you know sort of the information that I am working with in talking about this today. I was sort of brought in not too long ago when there were some issues about kind of the process, and asked to talk about the overall process to get a condo approved. I heard something from the gentleman that just spoke. I'm sorry, I lost where he's at. I do not know if a master deed was approved in 2020 or final plans were approved. I was not aware of that. So take what I say with the understanding that I may need to do a little more digging to find out what happened 4 years ago. But what I wanted to do was start off with just a 30,000 foot view of how a condo project is supposed to come to fruition in the city and the steps that you're supposed to take. And maybe we can have a little give and take to figure out exactly where we are, or maybe there's going to be more questions that have to be answered after this. That would not surprise me. Under your ordinances, the first step is what's called a conceptual plan review, and that is realistically is what it is called. General idea of sort of what the project's going to be. That's presented to the Planning Commission. This is before even a preliminary plan review. So a conceptual plan review is presenting to the Planning Commission. There's no public hearing requirement with a conceptual plan review, but what happens is Planning Commission schedules a meeting, sits down with the developer. The developer is supposed to be given verbal comments, sort of guidance on how to proceed, right? There's nothing approved at that meeting. It's really an introductory phase. Sometimes that'll occur in bigger municipalities with a zoning administrator, where you go in and have a meeting with them, and he kind of tells you, look, this is what you want to do. Here are the issues I see. Sort of trying to get your ducks in a row. So after that conceptual plan review, that's when the preliminary plan is filed. I guess that's when and pardon me, I'm pulling up between two different documents here, but I don't want to give you any misunderstanding. But after the conceptual plan review, preliminary plans filed, that has a little more detail to it. It's got, for example, basic road layouts, talks about consistency with ordinances and that sort of thing. That's presented to the Planning Commission as well. It's a more formal, more detailed plan than the conceptual plan review. Excuse me. The review period is supposed to be approximately 60 days under your ordinance. That's candidly pretty tight, and it's 60 days from when the Planning Commission has everything. Now, this is where notice requirements start. There's not necessarily a public hearing under your ordinance, but notice is to be given to all adjoining lot owners when the Planning Commission is going to review the preliminary plan. And your ordinance requires by the time the preliminary plan review period is complete, or when the review is complete, the Planning Commission's to give the applicant in writing notice that the plan review has been completed and approved, or a list of items that need to be addressed, or whether it's been denied. So that's the preliminary plan. That has to happen. So you have the conceptual plan review first, preliminary plan second, and after the preliminary review, the applicant has a 12-month period to submit final plan to the Planning Commission. The ordinance details, and I can go over this in a moment, but the ordinance details everything that's supposed to be part of the final plan. And that's inclusive of a master deed or proposed master deed. It's not to suggest they couldn't provide it earlier, but that's when the ordinance requires it to be provided. After the Planning Commission receives a proposed final plan, it's to make a recommendation to City Council to approve or provide the applicant with a list of outstanding items that need to be addressed prior to a recommendation for approval. So I've heard, and this is not something that I heard for the first time today, but the word variances I've heard and kind of leading up to this meeting. So your ordinances provide that on the step I just talked about before that, the preliminary plan approval, that you can require as a Planning Commission any necessary variances be obtained from the ZBA, if they're dimensional variances from the ZBA, if those are necessary for the project to go through as detailed in the conceptual plan, which kind of makes sense. I mean, everybody, if a plan is contingent on some variances, it doesn't make sense to keep going forward with the plan, put all the money and time both by the city and the developer, put that in up front, but not have an idea if the variances are granted. So that's not an uncommon thing, and I would suspect everybody would want to do that. But that's kind of the 30,000 foot view. I don't know what happened. I didn't get a chance to review Mr. Field's correspondence. I don't know if a master deed was approved. I don't know if we had final plan approval by City Council in 2020. But those are questions we would need to figure out to determine if they've kind of gone past their timelines that are necessary to complete the project, if they're in violation. of whatever approvals occurred, or if we're really still at step 1 or 2 of the verbal comments in the meetings with the developer and the preliminary plan review. I don't quite have a handle on where we're at. But it does sound like, based on communications I've had and frankly things that have been discussed tonight, but again, I've known about it before, that there are some things that would necessitate either variances or ordinance changes, one of the two, which was, I know, a question that was presented to me. So I'm happy to kind of answer questions that the council might have based on the information I know. I'm happy to tell you I don't know the answer and can get back to you if I don't have the information necessary. But I wanted to give that overview and start the discussion, I suppose.
Thank you, Alan.
I have one question, just the first one. You said during the second phase, it's common for the planning commission to request variances with the ZBA. It's not uncommon.
Oh, no, I don't. I would prefer, so the planning commission doesn't request the variance. The planning commission looks to see whether variances are necessary.
Okay.
And then the planning commission, and let me pull up give me 1 second here because I want to pull up the site interior ordinance so you guys can write this down. Under 150.109C, that's preliminary plan requirements. That provides that the planning commission may require the applicant to obtain a ruling on zoning variances from the ZBA and non-zoning variances from council prior to the preliminary plan review. What I meant, though, is as a developer or even as planning, if you're presented with a plan that's going to require a significant amount, or even not a significant amount of variances, I would want to know whether those are going to be granted before we continue down all the other steps, only to get to the end and say, well, you didn't get the variance. And everything that, every step, I'm going to give an example. I don't know if this is an issue or not, but let's say road width. So if a variance is needed on road width, you don't want to approve all of these plans and then a year later find out the ZBA is going to deny the variance. It just doesn't make any sense because it will change the preliminary plans if variances aren't granted. Okay. So I think it makes sense, common or not, I don't know, but I think it makes sense for the planning commission to say, before we're going to say up, down on the preliminary plan, go figure out if you can get these variances.
So I got a question too. This development is zoned RM multiple residential. When you look at the ordinances on that, they are not realistic. I don't think they're talking about dedicated residential streets with 56 feet of asphalt curb to curb. They talked about on dedicated residential streets, 51 feet asphalt curb to curb. I don't know the difference between the two, of course, but our local streets currently has a right-of-way of between 35 and 50 feet. Our asphalt is between 18 and 25 feet. And on major streets, the right-of-way is 66 feet, and the asphalt is 22 to 25 feet. Boardman Road has a recent reconstruction, which is a major street, and it has 25 feet of asphalt curb to curb. So my question is then, that ordinance don't seem realistic to what we got and what we're proposed, or what's been proposed. So the question is, how do we change that? Do we have the planning commission recommend to council that ordinance be rewritten and how to apply to this? Well, it should be rewritten anyway. It's because it's not realistic, but how it's applicable to the condo that's being developed or proposed.
It's two kind of different questions.
Okay.
And there's maybe two different approaches. If planning is of the mindset that it believes in general those road widths are not realistic, it can ask for what's called a text amendment to the zoning ordinance. It can recommend to planning it can recommend to city council a text amendment to the ordinance. There's procedures to do that which require public hearings and notice to get public comment and feedback on those text amendments. So generally, that would then apply to all RM properties, right? Now and in the future. Sometimes that leads to unintended consequences, but that's why I think that those things should be, text amendments to the zoning ordinance should be pretty heavily vetted, and you should have a planner take a look to see if we're making a change here, are we not thinking about how it's going to impact over here in the future? So that a text amendment to the ordinance would apply to likely to all RM districts. The other option is just a variance, like a traditional variance that would be applicable just to this property. And there's also notice and public hearing procedures that would have to go to the ZBA for that.
So to clarify that, then, you could change, the planning commission then could apply to this project only and make them relative to what it should be like. And in other words, they don't change the original ordinance?
No, but sort of. The answer is kind of. The ZBA can grant the variance.
Oh,
Yeah, not planning. Planning can require the applicant to go get whatever variances are necessary prior to approving the preliminary plan.
Okay.
So you can look at it and say, your roads as proposed are 25 feet, your setbacks are X, whatever. You're going to need at least these two variances. Go to the ZBA, have them conduct the public hearings that are necessary, get approval for the variances, and then come back and we'll continue, knowing that those things are covered.
okay, so the two options is to get a variance for the ZBA or
Change the ordinance.
change the ordinance.
Correct.
Okay.
One of those has to happen if they're not consistent with the RM requirement.
Okay.
When this was first sent over to planning, wasn't it for an ordinance change and not a variance?
It was, yeah.
It was for an ordinance change, not a variance.
Who sent it to planning?
We did.
At council.
Yeah, council sent it to planning.
Yep.
And I don't believe we ever got a full recommendation from them, but it was for the purpose of changing the ordinance, not variance.
Then what should occur at some point, if it hasn't already occurred, is as opposed to variances which are granted by the ZBA, planning is what is the body that holds the public hearings, takes public comment, and makes recommendations on ordinance changes coming back to the city council.
Okay.
So that has not.
That's what I thought the
Yep.
process was
That's
started
correct.
for an ordinance change, no variances.
Yeah, and I'm not advocating for one or the other.
Yeah.
But you need to just be careful when you're changing the ordinance to make sure. A lot of times you push a problem here and it comes out over
I mean,
here.
as of right now, we don't have a lot of residential multiple.
In fairness, that's a pretty wide. If we're only talking about the road width, that's a pretty significant road width. So maybe it's not realistic. I don't know.
I honestly think it was a typo when
Yeah.
when it was first put
I
in.
don't
Very well could have been. That's a big.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's bigger
So
than that.
when you look
It's
at
bigger than
M19 is
M19.
33
Yeah,
feet wide.
It's wide.
But just to comment on the issue at hand here, and to answer your question, Jason, recently the Planning Commission did send a set of recommendations for text changes.
Correct.
To my understanding, we did not hold a proper public meeting for that,
Okay.
and I'm very happy to say that we tabled that
Right,
at the
okay.
council level.
Yep.
So we
Good.
did not act on that at this point, so everybody knows that. And that was one of the points of trying to initiate this discussion, to make sure we were doing things correctly. And I see there's two tracks here overall, talking about the residential chart that is in there. I think that is incumbent on the city to do just what Mr. Francis was proposing. We need to look at that at the planning commission. We need to have our planners or engineers say that we are doing that correctly, update that piece of code, because our code book's antiquated and it doesn't make sense. It has not made, we've had these discussions for 4 or 5 months now. And so I think that's incumbent on the city to straighten that out. However, there's a bunch of other issues that I think are incumbent on the builder too. So I just wanted to clarify that point and put that out there for where we stand
Yeah,
on
I
that
remember
issue.
there was something that came, then we tabled it then?
Yes,
Okay.
so that has not been
So
acted on.
it's gone back to planning.
And I don't think it was conducted properly at the planning commission level
Yeah,
either.
okay.
And I'm happy if there's questions about that, to the extent I haven't answered them in communications, I can lay out the process
Sure.
again.
Yeah, we expect we'll have
Yeah.
follow-up here. We're not going to solve the problems all tonight.
Yeah, I just like another comment. It's kind of relative to the condo development, and I keep hearing 40 units. There was never, ever any 40 units suggestion. That's I don't know where that's coming from.
I don't believe the
but-
number has changed since it
No,
was first.
and now it's never. And of course,
I
I
think
don't get on the internet and do all that kind of stuff. But maybe it started there. I don't know. But it was never ever 40 units. So
I think that was based on a recommendation when it came back to us from planning. That
Oh,
was a number
when-
of planning.
did it? Yeah, because
Yeah, that was when it went to planning, and then Kenny basically redrew the whole development
And said it
and said, this is 40, it should be
Right.
40.
It was never
And so that's
40.
where the mix-up was,
That's
okay.
what fit. It wasn't originally 40.
No, I don't think the developer ever brought 40, I believe it was the same number we have now. But maybe that's what the
there was
confusion was.
one other comment I do want to make and I did send a memo to the attorney on this as well, and that's in reference to the notices. And there's 3 sets of notices that let me see if I can find them here. And this is regarding a public hearing. And I'm not going to bore you with the chapters and so on, but the one that relates to subdivisions, notice of public hearing by registered or certified mail. As it relates to condominium, the notice public is, and I shall state that it shall be the duty of the city clerk to send a written notice to all owners of adjoining land as to the time and place of the preliminary review meeting when the plan documents are reviewed. And the chapter that relates specifically to public hearing says it has to be within 300, those properties within 300 feet. So as it relates to this development, it's my opinion, and Alan can verify it, it's not if I'm wrong, but it don't have to be certified mail.
Yeah, I can give a legal opinion. That would be my general take on it. I'll confirm that, but I believe that to be the case.
Yeah. Okay. So that one's still up in the air.
No.
So it doesn't have to be certified as your
No, it don't have to
opinion
be
right now.
certified.
Generally, it doesn't have to be.
No.
Yeah.
Generally.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in this case,
So
it
you're
was-
saying, Mayor, sorry, not Mayor, former Mayor. You're saying that the subdivision act is what we call certified, because the condo ordinance doesn't.
no, that's
For
correct.
sure.
That's correct.
And in fact, the condo ordinance doesn't even. We also have to be aware of what we're dealing with. The condo ordinance doesn't call for a public hearing. It just requires notice be sent
Yeah.
to the adjoining lot owners of the meeting when the planning commission is
Right.
considering the preliminary
Yeah,
plan.
so when I went through the whole the ordinance there, and I came up with 3 things, and that's the 3 things.
Right.
Okay.
And that would have been the residences that were
The 300 feet.
within 300 feet at the time when we looked at the preliminaries back in 20...
21, I think.
Yeah, that was in 21, so.
A quick clarification on this, Mr. Francis, while you're here. If I read the code correctly, our chapter 151 is subdivisions.
Correct.
And in that
Right.
chapter, it says condos are subject to subdivision ordinances.
Well, the
Is that
condo ordinance, let me find the site for you, says that, let me give you the exact word here.
While you're looking that up, does the state law on condos, does that supersede the local?
It depends. It depends on if there's a conflict on a particular provision. We have to look at each provision. So your condo ordinance provides, and this is 150.107, a condominium subdivision development shall comply with applicable standards referenced below, also found in chapter 151.
That's what I'm referring
Yeah.
to.
But it talks about the standards, but not necessarily the notice requirements that are in there, but the standards that are applicable
For building and
For
so
building, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And
We are, even though we don't have to have a public hearing, as you said, we're still doing
You
that.
can have one,
We
absolutely.
We are having
Yep,
that.
yep. There's nothing that prevents this body planning.
We don't have to, but we're doing
you
it.
can absolutely
out
do
of
it.
I think we
respect.
might want to do that.
It's a good idea, yeah.
And when I talk about notice, whether it's 300 feet or adjacent lots, that's minimum notice, right? Like the city can decide it's going to publish when it doesn't have to. The city decides it can mail notice to more people than it's required to under the law.
They could decide to send a registered mail if they want to.
Correct. Yep.
If it's published, would that eliminate certified?
No.
No.
Well, because technically Steve's very close to the development, but yet from the property, he may not be 300 feet, right?
Correct.
Probably just
You're probably a
outside
little
that.
over that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is a
So
small.
he is adjacent,
This
you
is
know?
not a small community, right? It makes sense that you want community input. I mean, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I'd like the certitude, even if it costs us a few bucks, rather than come back and have the state telling us what we should have done.
So I think then what Alan is saying, then that this should be reviewed by the planning commission, and everything that's not in compliance with our ordinance, then we should look at if it's not realistic, like like the roads, so those are definitely not realistic, then we change those ordinance, and those that are realistic, then we have to get a variance from the ZBA or get adjustments from the builder. Correct?
Sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah.
Yes, and on that, so if there are variances that are not going to be adjusted, the code won't be adjusted to fix, right? So if there are things that are deemed reasonable but they need a variance to comply with, my position is that they go get that variance before planning gives the thumbs up or thumbs down
Before
on
the
even the
preliminary
preliminary plan.
Right, before the
Yes,
preliminary review.
like go make sure that what you're telling us you can do is going to be allowed by the ZBA. Then we'll tell you what other else we have.
Yeah, well, I think some of them that are definitely not in compliance. And I think the first thing would be talk to the builder and see what he can do about
Right.
it. Yeah, and then,
Yeah, I mean, if you don't need 'em.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and if you can't do anything about it, then because some of them I don't think the ZBA would even.
Yeah, and
give
so
a variance
it's
on it.
not an unrealistic ask to ask the builder to do that ahead of time. And I'll give you an example. There are often times where Mr. Wilson wants to buy Mr. Weaver's property, but your idea that you're going to use the property for or what you're going to build on the property requires a variance. So before you issue the check to Mr. Weaver, you come to the ZBA and say, hey, I'm gonna do this, and I'm not gonna buy the property unless I can do it.
Yeah.
So it's not unrealistic to say, go make sure you can do this before you have the city spend all this time and money in reviewing a plan that might get rejected by the ZBA.
You make it contingent.
Yeah, and the ZBA can the variance is going to be contingent on them doing getting all other. It's not like the granting of the variance is the preliminary plan approval either, right? It's just one step.
Yeah. Well, I think we've got to go back to the drawing board a little bit. Really, so.
Regarding the RM and the zoning, yes, I agree with that, but that still leaves a number of issues that need to be addressed that are on the builder to. Let me ask our clerk, do you know, Donna, did the builders ever come to you and actually request an application for a preliminary review?
That was a long time ago. I really
Okay,
don't
all right,
remember.
that's fair, because that is required in our ordinances, that they request a preliminary, an application, and it also lists a number of things that they've got to cover as far as expenses, attorney, review, planning,
This
all
guy's
those
raising his hand up.
number of issues. So I'm curious, yes, sir?
Can you address the council briefly?
Well, I don't know, that's up to Mr. Mayor.
It's up to you.
Mr. Mayor, I'm the attorney for the developer, so I may be able to answer some questions here that seem to be,
Very good.
yeah, I didn't want to inject because this is your meeting with the attorney, but.
Surprise.
I'm going to apologize. You left me a voicemail, and so I don't want to suggest that you didn't reach out to me beforehand. I was in Lansing the last 2 days, so I was not able to call you back.
Fair enough. So, regarding the request in 2021 about the initial site plan review, I actually wrote the email. I came here yesterday looking for a copy of the building file. There wasn't one, so I went through my emails this morning. There was an email request for a copy of the application. I was told there was no application. Please submit a letter. Please submit a couple of different things. That was done. As part of the site plan review was just a letter asking for this to be done. So that was the process in 2021. At that time, 2021, the initial portion, phase 1, was approved, final approval. Master deed was requested prior to final approval, which is a little different than other condominium projects I've done in the past, because there's sort of, not only was I required to do it, I was required to submit it to Macomb County Register of Deeds before it was approved, which is sort of cart before the horse. But we did it. It was recorded in 2021. The other
Phase 1, excuse me?
Phase 1, that's
Phase
correct.
1. I want to make that clear.
Yes, I'm sorry, yes. Phase 1, master deed was recorded summertime of 2021. I don't have it in front of me right now, but it's June or July. There was no back and forth with the planning commission. There was no request, this needs to be done, that needs to be done. I think there was a mention about the condominium association with phase 1. It really hasn't been put into place right now because there's no need for it. I mean, there's no assessments. It's just regular houses. You don't want to be assessed, right? I mean, maybe you do, then we'll put that together. So with phase 2, my understanding is that there was preliminary review was done in December, and the preliminary approval was done by the planning commission in December. Then it went to engineering with, I believe it's BMJ, city engineer, along with urban land consultant, the developer's engineer. Urban land consultant took your ordinance, downloaded it, put it in the site plan. So anything that was in the site plan is going to be consistent with your ordinance, unless he brings it to us and we come for a variance at that point in time. There's no, he designs around the ordinance, there's no need for a variance. So my understanding, I talked to Mr. Snyder from Urban Land Consultants today. He said he did everything according to the ordinance that was in place this was November, December of 2023. So we have Urban Land and BMJ have reviewed the current plans. My understanding from Mr. Snyder was that BMJ has approved the engineering and they are past that. There are some permits out with the state regarding the sewer and water, and at that point, engineering is done. We're at the point of final approval. So never got any comments back from Planning Commission, never got any comments back from a planner, never got any comments about ordinances being followed or not being followed. So our assumption is our professional who has designed 3/4 of the subdivisions in Macomb County is complying with your ordinances, and if something needs to be changed, we're happy to have a conversation with anybody. There was some discussion about developer not showing up. There was a meeting, I think in May. We didn't get notice of that meeting until after, saw it on YouTube. We're here today, the developer is out of town, but I believe this was a meeting with Mr. Francis, and the actual development didn't seem like it was on the agenda, so there was no need for him to be here anyway, as far as I can tell. I was here to listen, but there's some issues that need to come up. I'm happy to answer any questions you have now or after the meeting. I'll make myself available.
Just a quick comment, and again, I'm not wholly certain I am correct on this, but the meeting that we did have, which was on December 29th,
That's right.
there was not a public hearing involved with that. And also it seems to be that statewide is under the impression that when we had a zoning meeting to propose changing the zoning from R1A to RM, they were under the impression that constituted requirement and a fulfilling of that public meeting. And it's my opinion that it did not.
I'll be honest with you, I am not going to make any opinion of a public meeting until it becomes important statewide, in which case you're denying something because there was not a public meeting, that becomes an issue statewide. Otherwise, that is a city of Memphis issue.
Right, but I just wanted, since you referenced that December date.
That was an open meeting, right? It was recorded, I don't know about notice, but it was a public meeting.
Yes.
It was not a public hearing with notice to the parties, maybe, I don't know, but it was a public meeting.
Yeah, that's something we got to nail down.
So if it's a public hearing, you should be invited to it if it's pertaining to your property, right?
Absolutely.
Obviously.
Yeah.
We're within 300
So you
feet.
need that notice. Makes sense. Right?
And I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
I'm sorry, John, first name J-O-N, last name is E-A-D-I-E. I'm the attorney for statewide Memphis. I also represent M Squared Builders. I know there's some questions about that, and I can talk to people afterwards if they have questions.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware of some of the setbacks and et cetera are not concurrent with our ordinances? Or are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of that. Again, I defer to Pete Snyder, the urban land consultant engineer. Like I said, he would have designed, he's the one who designs it, he's the one who puts in the setbacks, and he would have done that from your ordinances that would affect at the time that he designed it. And I understand there may have been some changes since then, I'm not 100% sure, but he would have done it at the time, he would have taken it right off your website and done it with the information. Thank you.
Well,
And like I said, if anybody has any questions afterwards, or I'll make myself available to give my information.
All right, thank you.
okay. I would just suggest that we go back and we review all these and see what is in violation, what we can do to correct it, but also talk to have a meeting set up with our builder and developer, and ones that are in violation that we don't elect to change by adjusting the ordinances, then we see what they can do to make it concur, like setbacks and things like that.
If I may, I would just like to mention a few things that have been of concern to me regarding statewide and the whole overall view, not the road issue. I sent these to all the members of the Planning Commission. I just want to get it on the record briefly, and I'll expand on each one. If anybody's got any questions, I fleshed them out, but briefly they are this.
What page is that?
One was mentioned, vegetation control. Drainage is a big issue. That has to be ascertained. Do we get a final construction review of phase 1 to where we can check all the boxes and that's all good? And maybe we'll start thinking about phase 2. Of course, the public hearing issue with the preliminary review, which we've touched on. And the big one is the construction of this detention pond for phase 1. Now, the drawings I pulled from Macomb County show that detention pond is in place on those drawings. And it says, yes, and it says, is where I highlighted in the bottom there. Yes, but what does that say right there? You can read it.
Well, it must be built. Okay, I just seen it said proposed,
Okay.
so I didn't know.
And so
Is that-
the confirmation, again, and I don't mean to put Don on the spot because there's a lot, it's been a while ago, but have you ever received any confirmation of drainage easements from statewide?
Here's the thing, I don't take care of planning, whatever
Okay.
planning gets, it
Okay,
would be
I didn't want to put you on the
Amber
spot, I thought I would
Yeah.
ask just, but it is mentioned in several letters that these drainage easements, there's 18-foot wide swales that are going to go down to the back of these new properties, which will then go into another swale that will run eventually to this non-existent at this point detention pond. And those letters go back, and I'll just finish with this. I was on the chair of the planning commission when this first came. I was not on council, so just to reiterate real quickly, so I've been in on all of these meetings, and I'm, why I'm very happy to have this one, because there's a lot of points of confusion that I want settled in my own mind. 324 of 21, stated this development would happen, and it would be an apartment condo complex, which people were quite vocal saying they didn't want apartments in one public meeting that we had, but that's just maybe semantics. But a letter we got from 32221 from BMJ, our engineers, says Phase 1 provides for a detention pond to be constructed in 2 phases. The initial to accommodate the flow from single-family residential sites, and the second would be involved with the Phase 2. But it says that in the letter that I have. And it also recommends in that letter from March of 21 that easement documents are to be provided to the city. So that's over 3 years ago. March 26 of 21. Mr. Wilson discussed the necessity of having approval from the county of Macomb. Now, I think there's been some confusion. I'm still not quite certain about it. It says they signed off on jurisdiction. The way I understand that is if a detention pond is going to be discharging into a county drain or a drainage system that the county maintains, you have to get approval from the county to construct that detention pond. They signed off on their jurisdiction because it does not connect to a county drain. It drains through right next to my property out to the back toward Ashray Creek. That to me does not absolve them from building the detention pond, and that is the impression I kept receiving for the last couple of years. Oh no, they signed off on it. I got maps, I got charts of that, how that works. Those you can't see, that's where a county drain is. It's outside their purview, but those are some of the issues that I have, and as well as that, as part of what I sent to council, I cite, I don't know, there's 15 different things with the codes associated with them that need to be verified and give an opinion of whether they're up and down, and we'll work on that, now. I don't expect all these answers tonight, but there's work to be done, and I want to make sure we've checked all the boxes. We've just got done slugging it out with 2 lawsuits in this city, and I'm tired of that approach. I want to be proactive for a change, and this gives us an opportunity to do that with this issue instead of coming back later. I would like to be working on more positive things for the city rather than fighting out who's done what right and who hasn't, and we're going to have to bring in the attorneys. No disrespect to the attorneys at all. We need you. That's why I'm very happy to see you both here tonight.
We definitely need it.
I want to work together for the progress of the city. I've been here 20-some odd years. I live right down the street from this development. I'd rather have kept the way it was. But I'm trying to approach this as dispassionately as I can, being an advocate for the whole of the city. That's what I was elected to do. So I hope nobody takes offense on either side of the aisle here, wherever you are on this. I just want to do what's right for the city and for all of us going forward. There's a lot of changes coming down to Memphis. I'm not going to see them, but the next 20 years, there's going to be a lot of changes here. It's reaching out to us, folks. Population's expanding. And if we want to keep this 1 square mile city, we want to keep it a pleasant place to live, we need to be proactive and do our due diligence.
I got a couple things. Mel, construction review, phase 1, is that something you do? The final construction?
Final construction?
Yeah, is that something you do, final construction review?
I think our engineers.
The engineers do that? Okay.
So you're talking grades and then.
It's everything, it's grading and everything, so that kind of goes
That's
with the erosion and draining, we need
beyond
to,
my abilities to be.
okay.
Making sure that everything's at the right height elevation and it's done exactly to the standards.
Right, so we need BMJ to look at erosion, drainage, and for a final construction review for phase 1.
But we're not even on a preliminary review yet, but that...
Phase 1.
Yes, I would like that.
Phase 1.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I didn't know which one you're talking about.
Yeah,
I
talking
agree
about
with
phase
that.
1, not even about the condos, but let's wrap up what's going on with phase 1, because there are issues, obviously, people are bringing complaints with drainage, erosion, standing water, things like that. As far as the grass and the sidewalks, it'd be code enforcement, right? Even though those sidewalks are bad, unfortunately, they're not the worst in town, but that's another issue.
I'd say they are the worst in town right now.
Right now they may be, but yeah, Potter Street had some bad ones,
They're bad.
Yeah, no, I know, I've been down there.
They're destroyed.
Yep.
But it's temporary. Like,
Yeah, they're gonna be rebuilt once they're done with those
I
houses,
think that's the
right?
big thing, like, they're temporary.
Yeah,
I
maybe we
understand.
need to, and
And I
that's
think
what I'm
they
gonna
should
ask
be
Alan.
blocked. I do think there should be.
There should be an
blocked.
They should
alternative.
be temporary closed at least for now. But I wanna ask Alan, cause she brought up the ADA and things like that. What is your take on that entire issue there?
I don't know enough about the sidewalks we're talking about.
They're just messed up sidewalks because they've been, sidewalk wasn't meant for vehicles to go. They're, 3 inches, they're not made to be driven on. So the contractors with their heavy equipment have been, driving across there to get materials onto the job site. They've basically destroyed the sidewalk, and we realize that once the driveways are poured, the sidewalks will be fixed. That's a temporary thing. But what would maybe be your advice in the meantime, just from a liability standpoint for the city or anything like that? Do we just suggest that they temporarily close those sidewalks?
Let me get back to you on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all I have.
The other, so one thing,
looking at this map, it says or must be built, right? At the bottom, or must be built. So I'm assuming, that's a terrible word to use, right? We all know that by the end of phase one, these plans would be completed. Is that, I defer to you potentially on this one. By the end of phase one, all of the proposed and approved plans will be completed. Because phase one is not completed, right? I think we can all agree with that. They're still building houses and that stuff.
Right, the plans for phase one would be completed. There is future development, and that pond is part future development, part current development, I believe. I don't know, and I'm going to defer to our engineer.
Okay.
They did potential ponds, a complete engineer. They had
Sure.
calculations, they looked
Sure.
at our houses, number of water, and just leave it to them, so.
Further plans show expansion of it,
Yeah,
but though that Mr. Zimmer had there is what is currently on file for phase one.
yeah.
From your
It's
engineer.
not a hypothetical,
From our engineer,
that's
right. And I
real
think-
deal.
Yeah, I'm not sure, I think the plan may have been dig it all at once, rather than dig it part one, part two, but I would defer. to-
That's all I found of County Macomb as far as paperwork now, so all I could refer to was there other engineering plans that we did go over.
There's a full set of plans in the office, I did
Yes.
see those, okay.
Yeah, and there's another sheet that it says to refer to, but all,
Yeah, those are in the office.
Yeah,
They
we
did
just
point
have
to
this
that.
one right here, so. Okay, that was all I was gonna say. I think it's important, like, all of these things, like the building issues and things like that are temporary, I think.
Hopefully,
Just
yeah.
to keep that in mind.
That's what final review should make
Right.
sure they're temporary.
Right. I can't imagine they're gonna build those 3 houses and not replace the sidewalk, something like that.
And I don't know, maybe somebody, we can reach out to the developer and see if we can get a brush hog back there to take that grass down.
Took the words out of my
Well, I
mouth,
mean,
that would be a
I'll-
good step.
I'll
Just
tell you,
the brush hog,
Danny, that would be great.
Knock it down.
I've lived across that field for almost 10
It's
years.
always been long. It's
They
always been-
never cut it.
I know.
People who lived
But
there
they farmed
before
it.
Never
They
cut
They
it.
farmed it. Sometimes they farm it.
Not all the time.
Sir, I'm just gonna tell you, there was corn there, there wasn't grass and cattails in 6-inch deep water.
But if
You're
I
not-
if I don't
come up
cut
there,
my
take
grass,
walk.
I'm getting cited.
I'll take you.
What's the difference?
And there's people living.
Get back to our meeting here, folks.
Opposed to
Let's
years
sit-
ago.
Please.
What the heck?
That's all.
Anybody else here? No. Anything else, Steve?
No, thank you.
Okay.
I have a question just for clarification. So the initial project of the houses, is that part of the condo? Are they under a homeowner or a homeowners association or not?
They were built under the condo.
Do we have a copy of the homeowners association?
You should. It was submitted as
I-
part of the
that-
initial application.
You do now, eh?
It's part of,
Excuse me.
yeah, it was developed under the Michigan Condominium Act as a site condo. So the lots themselves are separate, but there's common ownership of a small piece of common
So
area.
does that mean that the condo association will be responsible for Bell River Road in front of their house?
No. Bell River Road's it's either a city road or
City.
county road. There's very little,
But
any responsibility.
For the road work of the rest of the condo, they will be assessed to keep the roads up, right? Because I know, but they're supposed to be, they're not being turned over, it's gonna be part of the association.
We're talking about the phase 2 with the road and back there.
The condo.
Yeah.
They would be assessed and they would be required, I believe it's a private road, I don't have it in front of me. If it's private
It's
road,
private.
they'd be required to maintain it.
We were told.
Snow removal, all
Snow
that.
removal, all that, yeah.
From my understanding, those will be private roads. They'll have to
So
be
actually,
maintained.
those homeowners will be responsible for the sidewalks that are on Bell River in front of their houses.
Yeah,
That's in our ordinance.
Yes.
Okay.
So they may not, actually, the houses that are built in phase one may not actually be subject to the HOA rules that they finally come up with, or the,
There's 2 HOAs, or 2 condo associations, 2 separate.
so there'll be one for phase one and one for phase two?
That's correct.
Okay.
Completely separate, there's no need for, I mean, except for probably maintenance of the detention pond, there's no conflict of interest.
Yeah, that's good.
Does phase one, is that all the houses only?
Yes.
And that includes the 3 across the street
No.
on the east side?
No, those were developed as vacant lots.
Okay. They're not part of the association.
They're not part of the
Those were sold separately, platted out,
Yes.
not site condo. Okay.
Has there been a traffic study done on Bell River?
Now, the engineer does those things.
I was just wondering if there was one done though. There's a lot of things that's supposed to have been done that haven't been done. Not trying to be mean, but-
Council members have anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Is there anything else you would like to add, Alan?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Right.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll make take a motion to adjourn, please.
Just did it.
Second, oh, whatever.
So move. Meeting adjourned.
Steve, are you the chairman? No, I'm not. I'm just a cop.